And I'll say we're a week away from reopening on November the 9th. We have finally made some pretty significant decisions about our instructional models and our bell schedules and some of our sanitation and health and wellness procedures. And so I'm going to share just a little bit about that this morning. And then I'm going to open it up for questions to see if there's anything that I can clarify or make you feel better about your child's experience as they continue with online learning, or your child's experience as they get ready to return to us in person. So I'm gonna share my screen for just a second. I know I don't normally do that, but I want to make sure that I'm being real clear about the decision making that we had to do. So if you'll forgive me for just a second. Here we go. If you joined us for any of our previous principals coffee after the decision was made to return, you'll know that the district provided us with these 4 models of online learning to choose from. I'm using that word choose. I'm going to put it in quotes because what it really means is we had these as options to try to meet the needs of our school. But a choice is a really weird word because it means that we're intentionally using one of them over other ones. And as we did our scheduling work, it turns out that we didn't have as many choices as we really wanted to have because of some of the constraints that we were under. And so again, just really briefly, the separated model means that some teachers teach online and some teachers teach in person. Those 2 teachers don't mix up. The segmented model means all teachers teach some sections of in-person and some separate sections of online. The simultaneous model means that teachers teach both online and in-person students at the same time. And the quadrant model would be where we were partnering up with BHL or Hillsman or Coyle or one of the other middle schools and providing services that way. And so as we made our decision around the models we were going to use, and I'm using models plural because we were not able to come up with one model that would work for the entire school based on the constraints you see here. We did have to make sure that we were offering the choice for all of our students to choose between online and in person, which meant we have to continue to provide all of the different levels of courses that we offer, both online and in person. So when you think about a support class or an advanced class or an accelerated class or a high school level class, we weren't able to restrict any of those options to either online or in person. So we had to provide both of them. We also had to continue providing all of our program services that are required either by state law or by federal law, including gifted services, special ed services, ESOL services, all of those things. And then a week ago today, so last Friday, we did hear from Human Resources, and there were some requirements that they gave us for accommodating teachers who were in high-risk categories. And so we did have to make those accommodations, which influenced the models we were allowed to choose, particularly with those teachers. I'm a little careful about how I talk about that because on the one hand, it made our problem solving and our planning really, really challenging to have a certain number of teachers that we had to accommodate. But at the same time, I think ultimately Human Resources is making the right decision in terms of trying to protect the most vulnerable in our school community, and that's both students and teachers. And so ultimately, I think it was the right thing to do. It just did make it harder for us to do our planning. And then finally, we had to think about time. Like I said, we got our final student numbers about 10 days ago, and we got our teachers that we had to accommodate about 6 days ago, and we've got 4 working days left before the start of school, and so we had to consider the level of schedule changes we would be able to do, the level of reworking the building we would be able to do with the time that we had. And so ultimately, and this was not what we wanted, we were trying to plan the school around the segmented model entirely. 6th grade, because of the constraints that we have, will be primarily simultaneous. 7th grade is going to be primarily segmented, and then 8th grade, and this is primarily because of the number of high school courses they offer and our ability to offer the high school level and the on-level classes to both online and in-person students without any additional resources or personnel. We'll be using a mix of the separated model and the simultaneous model. And then we're still working on our connections plan currently, and each of those different courses between CTAE, Fine Arts, World Language, and Support will likely use a different model going forward. I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna go back so I can try to look and see some of the people who've joined us. And that was a lot in terms of the decision making that we had to do. I've got some other things that I want to update, but before I go on to those updates, I do want to pause just for a second and see if there are questions about the models that we chose, why we chose them, how we had to choose them, or what that might look like for you or your children.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm sorry, I was trying to jot down the notes that you were sharing on your screen, and I think I may have missed something, but I know like Matthew, he's in seventh grade, and you said he was going to be primary segmented. Okay,
Yep.
so
And so did he, is he returning in person or is he staying online?
virtual,
He's staying
online.
virtual.
Hmm.
So that means as a seventh grader, his classes will not look particularly different than they have up to this point in seventh grade. His teachers will be teaching sections in person, but the sections that he'll be in online will be solely online classes in seventh grade.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And to go back just a minute, and I forgot to also mention, we did have all of those constraints that we were working with, but we worked pretty conscientiously with our school leadership team and our scheduling team to also really think about where our priorities were. And while we couldn't necessarily meet these priorities everywhere because of the constraints, we did hear from our parent community that maintaining the current relationships that kids have with their teachers was important, and especially with our special ed students and some of our other highly vulnerable populations, that they formed these connections with teachers through their online experience, and we want to keep them as much as we can with those teachers. And so we prioritized not changing teachers wherever we could. We prioritized minimizing class sizes to provide the room for social distancing, and to keep our teachers and our students safe. And then we prioritized instructional efficacy and our teachers' ability to provide meaningful instruction. I will say, if we look at those three choices by grade level, sixth grade primarily simultaneous, seventh grade primarily segmented, and eighth grade a mix of separated and simultaneous, this does minimize the kids whose schedules will change from one teacher to another. There will be a handful that we'll have to do primarily because of program services and making sure those students still receive those required services. But we will be able to keep the majority of students with the teachers that they have. In sixth grade and eighth grade, most students will be with the cohort of other students that they've been with, so they won't see a significant change in their classes. In seventh grade, while students will have the teacher that they've had so far, because we're moving students into full online cohorts and then full in-person cohorts, there will be a little bit of mixing around of the periods. And our target right now is to be able to share schedules with students the way that we did prior to the start of virtual learning. We'll share them through email to all parents and students. And I believe our target right now for that is Thursday of next week. I'm seeing in the chat, what does it look like to be simultaneous both for virtual or in person? We're still looking at some different models for what that looks like for instruction. Again, we've tried to write a bell schedule that will make instruction look pretty similar for our online students. So they will still plan on getting a quick warm-up activity that they'll do combined with the students who are in the class. They'll get a mini lesson that's teacher directed, where the teacher is modeling a new skill, teaching a new skill, engaging students with an activity that introduces them to new content. And then, as we've done before, there'll be time for our students who are currently online to have some asynchronous time where they can work on activities independently, or they can stay logged in for assistance from their teacher. And so for our online students, it'll look pretty similar to what it's looked like before. The challenge is they're going to be splitting the attention of the teacher between the students who are online and the students who are in person. Our instructional coaches have already reached out to some schools in our surrounding areas, particularly in Gwinnett. And they've also started looking at some research that's come out very recently around different ways to do that in meaningful ways. And we're going to be presenting those to our faculty as we come back next week to prepare. Some of what that might look like could be a teacher who sort of alternates on a day-to-day basis. And so maybe Monday, my first 30 minutes, I'm focusing on the students who are online while my in-person students are working more independently. Then on Tuesday, I'm going to flip that and I'm going to do the first 30 minutes with my in-person students and the second 30 minutes with my online. So that would be sort of a hybrid model. It might be that we are looking at the different adults that we already have in the building, where we can supplement adults who may not be credentialed teachers, but may be able to go in and support teachers to work with small groups. We do have a counseling team. We've got behavior specialists. We've got gifted collaborators that have a little bit more flexibility in their schedule that we can push into some of the classes where the mix of online and in-person may be harder to manage. And I'm thinking there, an even split's honestly easier to manage to me. It's those places where you've got, 16 students in person, but only 2 students online, where I worry that the online students might get lost a little bit in the mix, or the opposite. And so that's where we're looking how we might creatively use some of the other personnel in our building to supplement the support in those classrooms where we have a big mix of where students are. Some other models that we've seen as effective, if your kids did center model ever in elementary school, where they worked on an activity maybe independently, they worked on an activity with a paraprofessional or a support teacher, and then they worked on an activity with their teacher in maybe 15 or 20-minute segments. We're looking at that as a model that might help put the teacher's attention on both the in-person and the online students. And then there are a couple of others that are coming out of Couch Middle School, I believe, in Gwinnett. And we're trying to go visit them early next week as well. They've been doing the simultaneous model since August, and their principal feels confident that while it didn't necessarily start particularly strong, that it has grown strong since it started. And so we're going to go visit them next week and in order to try and get some additional ideas for how we might manage that. I'll say, and while you're thinking of other questions, you might want to put in the chat. It was not an easy decision. It was a challenging decision. And it really didn't come down to being a decision at all. My scheduling team has worked all week. They've cloistered themselves in the art room, socially distant, mask wearing, of course, and gone through all of the different possibilities for how we might have rescheduled the school. They were completely willing to do whatever work was necessary to give us the model that was going to be most effective. And the models that we are left with are really the only ones that were feasible given the parameters that we had to work within. Again, they went through every single possible scenario, and they're more than happy. I'm more than happy to hold a separate session where our scheduling team can talk people through the minutia of what it feels like to schedule a middle school like ours, and just explain everything that they did to try to solve this problem in a way that gave everybody what they wanted, and we couldn't do it. I'm more than happy to come back to that. I'm going to move on to just a couple of quick updates, and then I'll open it up for questions again. And I am going to share my screen again, just because I do feel like I've got a lot of information, and nobody needs to worry about remembering every single bit of this. I'm going to publish all of this. I'm probably going to do an update this afternoon for parents, and then I'll do my typical Sunday update as well. So all of this will come out in writing, and I'll have parent-friendly documents that support things like our bell schedule for you to look at as well. And so in terms of our bell schedule, like I've said previously, we do need to do some work to align our bell schedule for online and in-person students, because both of those need to be similar enough that our teachers will be able to teach both simultaneously. And so the district gave us the academic hours of 8:45 to 3:45. The transportation department said that buses would start arriving at 8:10 and should finish arriving by 8:30. And so our arrival time for both walkers, car riders, and buses is going to be 8:10 to 8:30. We are not able to accommodate early arrivals this year. We usually open the building at 7:30. We let kids play basketball in the gym, hang out in the media center, hang out in the front hallway. And that's manned by a group of volunteers that just feel compelled to give students that time in order to socially distance kids at that time. And it's usually around 150 to 200 kids that come early. We would need a lot more volunteers than I can get to show up early to supervise students. And so we won't be opening early. Like I said, the academic time is going to be 8:45 to 3:45. We've built extended time into every single one of our blocks in order to do extended transitions. There's going to be a sanitizing protocol after anytime a student changes classes, which we're trying to minimize that as well. There's a sanitizing protocol, so we've built time into our schedule for that. We've also built extended transition time during the day so that we can transition by team as opposed to having the whole hallway out at any given time. To give you an idea what that feels like numbers wise, we've got about 450 students who are going to be returning to us. So you're talking about 150 students who are going to be on the hallway on any given day at any grade level. And then at a team level, we're talking about 50 students who would be on a team. And so we're looking at transitioning about 50 students together at a time, which given our hallways, as long as we're able to utilize the entire length of the hallway, we should be able to do not necessarily 6 feet completely apart at all times, but with a level of social distance that we don't normally have in our building. One of the things that we've managed to sort of eke out as a positive from everything that's changing right now is I'm not using the word recess in writing anywhere, because I don't ever want it to seem like recess, because that word seems to get me in trouble in middle school. We have managed to include break time every day into our schedule. We thought we do want to make sure there's time for kids to go outside. That's an opportunity for them to get 6 or 7 feet away from each other, to take off their masks and have a little break from their masks. It's also just built in a little bit time because school is going to feel a little stricter. And so we want to build some time every day for everybody just to take a minute and relax. And for most of our grade levels, that'll be around the lunchtime period. And so it may be right before they go to lunch. It may be right after they go to lunch. We are also returning to 2 connections periods per day for our in-person students. We're still looking at how to solve the problem of our connection scheduling for our online students. And then breakfast will be grab and go. So students will grab their breakfast as they enter the building. They'll eat that in their first block classroom. And then lunch is going to be either in classrooms or outside where the weather permits. We did have some grant funds that one of our teachers very generously, she was awarded the grant for outdoor spaces in general. And she said that given the situation we were in, she really wanted to use that money to purchase additional picnic tables that we could put outside to allow additional outdoor classroom area and outdoor lunch area. And so we've got about 10 additional picnic tables that'll be delivered, I think, tomorrow to supplement what we've already got. What you're seeing right now is just our 6th grade schedule. Again, we've been on a really tight timeline, so I'm going to transition these documents into parent-friendly documents before I send my update on Sunday. But this just sort of gives you an idea of what the in-person times are going to look like. You can see for 6th grade here, their core 2nd period starts at 8:45, and then each of those blocks is about an hour long. We've got this long hour for lunch in the middle of the day, and that's to accommodate lunch, sanitizing after lunch, and students taking a break of some sort. That's an increase in lunchtime from about 22 minutes last year to a full hour this year, so we're happy about that. And then you can see we've got the 2 connections periods, and we've maintained our advisement/ELT period as 30 minutes, and it's no longer going to be consistent across the building. So 6th and 8th grade will have it at the end of the day. 7th grade will have it at the beginning of the day. The last just couple of updates that I've got have to do with health and wellness, and just some of the things that we are doing are to keep our students safe. Is we have installed quite a bit of signage in the building, both to direct students on where to walk so that they are able to stay socially distant. We've got lots of signage in our building around hand washing, around mask wearing, around social distance. And so I feel good about that we're really messaging what the important things are for our school community to consider. They're currently today installing our water filling stations. I'm super excited about that. So our water fountains are all going away to replaced by water filling stations. And Mr. Lawrence Harris in the Department of Community Engagement has very generously purchased water bottles for all of our in-person students. So if anybody comes to school and doesn't have a water bottle, we'll provide them with one so they can have access to water. Our custodial crew has increased their sanitation procedures, and they will be doing a deep clean every weekend. And then we've had, as I've said, I think twice in my parent letter recently, we've had an air quality check of our building. They've come in, they've taken data on the air quality, on the level of circulation, and they've assured me 100% that while our HVAC system does not do a very good job heating or cooling the building, it does a really good job of circulating fresh air into our classrooms. And ultimately, that's what we need it to do to protect us from COVID. And so even if it doesn't do the other things, we're happy that it does that. And then finally, as far as cohorting goes, we've talked about different levels of cohorting. Again, because of our program requirements and the number of students staying online and in person, we were not able to cohort at the classroom level. We are cohorting at the team level, which means students will, for the most part, only be exposed to students who are within that 50 student sort of cluster on their team. And even within that 50 student cluster, we're going to be asking teachers to keep very strict seating charts and seating arrangements. And so over the course of a day, your child should only really be exposed for 15 minutes or more, which is that DPH guidance for what close contact is, should only be exposed for 15 minutes or more to 10 to 15 students over the course of the day. They absolutely will come into contact with other students during transitions, during arrival and dismissal. We've timed all of those things to keep them below that CDC recommendation or that DPH recommendation, but students will find themselves close to 10 to 12 students, possibly 15 at the most, as they transition through a day at school. All right, whew. That was a lot. I'm going to go over to my chat while y'all are thinking if y'all have any questions. Ms. McMakin has said one benefit of Simultaneous is that the quarantine students can keep coming to class. So that was one of the things that we thought about. Again, if it had come down to actually choosing one of the models, that might have influenced our choice. But unfortunately, we really weren't given a whole lot of choice given the parameters we had to work within. The other nice thing about the way that the schedule works now is it gives us flexibility for that January 15th return time. So currently, as far as I know, the district is planning for a full return to in-person instruction for all students on January the 15th. If that happens, the way that we're doing our schedules now will make the transition, particularly for 6th and 8th, pretty seamless. It'll be a little more schedule changey for 7th, but not outside of the bounds of what's possible. And so it makes that transition a lot easier, and it also makes quarantines a lot easier. If a student goes out, they'll be able to continue participating in the class that they're in without a significant change to their teacher or to their classroom community. What other questions do you have? Or concerns?
How about this? Will the workload change? Will the workload change?
I think for students who are shifting their format from online to in-person, it may feel different just because being in the building for 8 hours a day versus having that 30-minute break in your class versus being able to go to the bathroom whenever you want. I think our kids who are at home have a slightly more relaxed environment. And so it may feel, I don't think it's going to actually be more academic work, but it's probably for our students coming back going to feel a little more tiring. The other thing it's going to feel is just more strict. So like my kid's been wearing his pajama bottoms for his first 3 periods every day and playing a game of Fortnite in between every class that he's got. He's going to come back in person and he's going to be a little floored that those things aren't possible anymore, and he's going to have to get accustomed to it. But I don't necessarily think the workload itself will change considerably. Part of our work in the interim between coming back on the 9th and Thanksgiving is to do some real work with our teachers on where we are in the year, what students have mastered so far and what we have left to master before state testing in April. Because we lost 6 weeks at the beginning of the year. We know we haven't been able to teach as quickly as we would normally teach with students in person. And so we've just got to assess how much is left to teach and then do a little bit of curricular work to decide what the most important things are. And that may change the intensity just a little bit, but otherwise I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Eberhardt's asked when 6th grade orientation will be. We are looking at doing 6th grade orientation on November the 6th. We're going to do orientation by team. We're going to start around 9:30 in the morning, and we're going to do about 1.5 hour sessions for each team. And again, that's to try to keep social distance. We haven't yet decided if we're going to limit students to 1 parent with them on orientation. Because again, we've got about 50 students on any given team. And if they all bring 1 parent, that's 100 people in the building simultaneously. And while we do have enough room to stretch those people out, if people started bringing multiple parents, as well as big brother and grandma and auntie and everybody else, it would get pretty packed pretty fast. It is going to be an abbreviated orientation from what we would normally do. So normally we pull out all the stops. We have all the different services set up in the gym for people to talk to. We do a big gathering in the cafeteria and introduce the whole team. It's going to be a little more subdued, but it will include an opportunity for students to meet their first block teacher and identify where that room is, to see where their team is located on the hallway, to take a tour of the building, and to hear from our admin and leadership teams, just so they know who everybody is in the building. Ms. Couch has asked, will food still be available for virtual students? Yes, the district is planning on continuing its meals for online learners. The big change to that program is they are no longer able, because they'll be running the buses to bring students to school. They no longer have the capacity to do the meal deliveries. And so meals will be available at, I want to say it was 15 different locations within the district, and Clark Middle is one of those locations. And we'll continue to do our drive-through over on the Alps Road side of the building.
Okay, and have you heard anything about the hours, whether we had talked last time a little bit about will they have any pickup hours outside of regular business hours at all?
And that I have asked and have not gotten anything new about. So at this point, I'm going to tentatively say that that's a no, but I'll continue to push and see if I can get something else arranged for that.
The hours are 11 to 12.
Yeah. And what we were looking
Okay.
at was trying to figure out whether they could offer some after business hours for people who can't come between 11 and 12. And I'll continue to push and see what I can get for that. I think part of the issue for doing that is their food sanitation guidelines and making sure that things are either heated or cooled properly. They're not able just to sort of leave it out for people to come and get at later hours.
Sure. I understand. They can do what they can do, but if you get any more information, just please let us know.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
They'll also be coming, they'll also be doing it every day. Right now, it's only Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but
Okay.
November 9th, it'll be every day, 11 to 12.
Okay, that's good to know so people can arrange accordingly.
Hmm.
Thank you.
And it'll be interesting, well, because we will have some picnic tables out there on that same side, so some in-person students can eat their lunch and maybe wave at some online students who are driving by. Ms. McMakin has made the comment about struggling at UGA with the simultaneous model and students being able to hear. I experienced that personally. I tried to run my own meeting, partly online, partly in person, just so I could feel what we were about to ask teachers to do, because I think that's important for me to know as a leader. And it is hard, and that was one of the big things that came up. And so we have told our teachers, if as they're doing their planning for the model, they want for the strategies they want to use for implementing that model, if they would like a Bluetooth microphone to use in order to be able to wander around the room. We've also looked, I'm not sure if we have the budget for it, but looked at the swivel cameras for a teacher who might want to be able to just set their camera stationarily and have it follow them around the room. We're definitely looking at some of the technology tools that would support teachers in doing that. Ms. Eberhard's asked about the bus schedule. I understand that the transportation department is currently trying to route based on the information they got from the parent registration surveys. They have not given us any additional information, but I would expect them, really, if they usually run practice routes ahead of time, and given the timeline that they're on, I would expect routes to be ready by Wednesday or Thursday of next week. There is, and I'm not sure if they plan on utilizing it at this point, so I'll see if I can find out before my Sunday update. There is an online tool you can use on the district's website under the transportation department, where you can type in your address and it will tell you your bus number and the time. And I believe that would be the easiest way for you to get your route information by Wednesday or Thursday of next week. I do think they've also said, and this is not a COVID or a pandemic or a return to school issue. This is an every year issue. The first couple of days of school, bus routes are challenging. Some students need to get on the bus that we didn't think needed a route, and some students aren't at their stop when they need to be. And so it's a little bit slower. So just be prepared for a little bit of a wait those first couple of days of school. Sorry, I feel like I'm getting this sun right in my face, like a tattoo across my forehead or something.
I was wondering about the teachers that are coming from other schools that you had said that high-risk teachers. Do we get some? And if so, if all the kids are staying with primarily with the teachers that they had, where are those teachers?
You broke up just a little bit, but what I'm hearing is asking about the teachers that we're accommodating. And the teachers that we're accommodating at this point are all Clark Middle teachers. They were teachers that I was not aware needed accommodation until Human Resources contacted me. And honestly, I think that, again, it shows sort of that the system works the way that it does, that our Human Resources Department is looking at Family Medical Leave Act and looking at teachers who need accommodation, and sort of separating that from me having to make instructional decisions around the building. So they are all Clark Middle teachers, which is one of the ways that we're able to maintain everybody with their existing teacher, or not everybody, the majority of students with their existing teachers. What other questions do you guys have? Just a couple of additional notes. I've had a lot of concerns about lunch and lunch in classrooms, and I hear those concerns. That's one of the reasons that we're going to be encouraging teachers, as long as the weather holds, to eat lunch outside as much and as often as they want. And so some things that you might think about having for your children, or having them bring in their backpacks every day, maybe a towel that they could lay down and they can put down to sit on in case their teacher is taking them outside. And again, making sure that they've got a water bottle with them. We are not going to use lockers this year. We've we find that only about half of students actually utilize their lockers at the middle school level anyway. And it just creates another opportunity for transmission and for close contact. And so students will be carrying their backpacks around with them. The good thing is that we don't have big, huge textbooks like we used to have 15 or 20 years ago. And so I don't expect that to be too much for most of our students. We're also looking at how we might use our cafeteria. Again, the way our building is sort of put together and the way that the traffic flows within the building, it's really hard to figure out how to use that cafeteria in a way that keeps kids who are in line 6 feet away, as well as kids who are eating lunch 6 feet away. And so that's one of the reasons that we're not planning on using our cafeteria primarily as our lunch location. The other is the time that we have to get 500 kids through a lunch line and do it so in a socially distanced way makes it difficult to utilize that space. Well, I don't want to keep people here unnecessarily. I'm seeing in the chat, would we want covered space for lunch or outdoor time when the weather's not cooperating? I've thought about that and I haven't found a solution that I feel like would be sustainable enough for us to maintain for the duration. So we're talking about at minimum, 7 school weeks, but then we've also got lots of other time. And so if we were to put up lots of tents, I worry about them blowing away. I worry about the durability because most things like that are not meant to be permanent structures. They're meant to be temporary structures. And I worry I wouldn't be able to maintain them with the custodial staff that I've got. We do have a couple of places where we do have some shelter already in the building or outside of the building. We've also got our courtyards that are more heavily treed than most of the other places in the district. And so we do have some shady areas outside already. If people have suggestions for ways that we can provide covered outside shelter, I'm more than open to it. My budget is pretty limited right now, and I'm trying to focus my budget on instructional materials. But the thing that I would have to consider is one, are we able to maintain and sustain it? Two, like if somebody was donating a pop-up tent or I can't even remember what the things are called, like the Pavilion covers that you see at big craft shows and things like that. What sort of maintenance would those things require, and would they hold up to the elements if we were to try to put things like that up? And those are the things that we would consider. Yeah, again in the chat, Ms. McMakin is suggesting something, and I'm thinking, like, I don't know, maybe it was 7 years ago, 8 years ago, the PTA at Chase Street put up an outside pavilion for parents to wait for their walkers after school every day, and it was a more consistent structure than something that was temporary. And yeah, I think things like that would work. What we have to think about is the law of diminishing returns for us right now, and the fact that we are going to break ground on a new building in about 1.5 years or 2 years, and everything that's in our current space will likely be destroyed. And so I hate to ask people to come and do that kind of work knowing we're going to destroy it pretty quickly. Yeah, and it would not have to be particularly fancy. And if people have connections with service groups or people in our community who might be willing to help us with things like that, again, please feel free to give them my contact information and we'll get with them. The other thing that we have to make sure that we get approved every time we do something like that is we have to go to plant services and make sure it doesn't impact the groundskeeping maintenance schedule for the building. And I do think most of my teachers, I think, already have their eye on the outside. And we are going to empower them and give them absolute permission that if it's nice and they can manage and they want to teach outside, they can teach outside. And if they want to eat outside, they can eat outside. And if they want to break outside, they can break outside. And whatever we need to do to support that, we'll do. I'll also just say, there's a tiny bit of liberation when you finally recognize the things that are within your power and not within your power to do. And in this last week, we've really, as a school, recognized what we can and cannot do. And so our goal is going to be to maintain positive connections and relationships with our students, to continue to provide academic movement and growth for all of our students. But we also recognize that it is not a normal year. And we are not going to see the same outcomes that we would see in any normal year. And we are not going to see the same growth in any normal year. And we're not going to close gaps as fast as we want to close them. But we are going to make sure that our students and our teachers are safe. And we are going to make sure that they come back to school and feel good and safe and well being in school. All right, I'm going to pause for just about another 10 seconds to see if any other questions come in that might be for the good of the group. And then we can break off, and I'll give some updates this afternoon and some updates over the weekend as well. If anyone would like to stick around and ask personal questions about your child or about your child's grade level or anything else that maybe not be for the good of the group, I'll be happy to stick around. Well, thank you everybody for joining me. I hope y'all have a good weekend and a good rest of your day.